Good morning and welcome to the Lightcast Studios for this live analysis of the JOLTS report, a Bureau of Labor Statistics report that stands for Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey and gives us a glimpse into the health of our economy. On this January 4th, 2023, I'm your host, Christopher Laney, and I am joined by senior labor economist Layla O'Kane and our Lightcast chief economist, Bloody Teska. Bloody, Layla, welcome to the studios.
Thanks, Chris. Happy New Year. I'm impressed you got that year right in the intro.
Yeah, no, I thought about that. Actually, I think our last report, I think I messed up the year and said 2023 and it was still 2022. So it's good to have you here. Layla, I'm going to start with you. Where do we go from here? What's your first take on this analysis?
Yeah, this was a pretty surprising one. So as we've been saying for a while, nothing much changed. But in the last month, we kind of thought, oh, things are starting to trend downwards. Openings are trending down a little bit. Maybe layoffs are trending up a little bit. Maybe this is some signs of cooling. And in this report, we're really not seeing that happen that much. Openings were revised up. So the October number is up to around 10.5 million. And so is this November number. So it was pretty unexpected.
So, Bloody, just like Layla said, it feels like all year last year we were saying at some point the ball's going to drop, right? Like we're going to see less separations, we're going to see less, job openings. It doesn't seem like that's happening. What are you seeing in this report, and are we just expected to see the same elevated situation in the labor market?
I mean, I think as Layla said, this was generally a positively shocking report. No one was expecting these numbers, but I can say, they are bad numbers, especially for the employees. So, openings did remain quite elevated. I think the two largest surprise was that layoffs did not decrease as expected, as they would put it in the media. We're expecting to see the effect, especially of the tech layoffs that was in November in this report, and we didn't see a lot of that. There was a little bit of a uptick in professional and business services, but overall layoffs actually did not increase; they decreased. And then the other large surprise was quits. Quits had started to slow down in the previous kind of reports, and in this one they remained pretty high and in fact increased. So overall, a very surprising report, but I would say that in some ways that is positive for the economy overall.
So, Bloody, you alluded to this just a second ago, but what was kind of your biggest takeaway or shock when you look at the industry-specific data? You mentioned professional services, but anything else that kind of just pops out to you?
I mean, for the layoffs, the fact that we saw that uptick, I mean, it's a little bit tricky because you're not, where the tech industry exactly is in between sort of these two industries. And we saw the effect on one of them, but we didn't see the effect on the other one. So especially, if, for example, we saw quits increasing significantly in information, where you have a lot of these specifically, tech companies. And that was extremely surprising. But overall, I would say everything from quits to separations to openings themselves, across the board, I would say the surprising was that they all remained fairly elevated, in the sense that they were good news. We expected the economy to cool down more, and we did not see that.
So, Layla, staying on kind of the industry data, anything that you would add or anything that you saw that kind of was a shock to you?
Yeah, I mean, some interesting things. We saw a really strong manufacturing sector, so openings up and layoffs down. And we also saw some strength in retail trade. That's not super surprising. Again, this is November data, so this is partially picking up some of that holiday season. It's a little bit lagged. But that also shows that those sectors are still doing well. And I think there has been a little bit of concern about manufacturing. And so it was good to see that openings are still strong in that sector. The other thing I'll mention is that I think layoffs were up in financial services, but down again, as Buddy was saying, in information, and I think a little bit down in business and professional. And so this idea that the big media has been talking about these sort of big tech layoffs in November, and the idea that this is a structural problem is not really borne out in this report.
So, Layla, staying on you for just a second, as we move into 2023, what sentiment do you think industry leaders or CEOs might have? Are they optimistic? Are they hesitant? Or are they kind of cautiously moving forward?
I think people don't really know how to feel, which is not surprising, since sort of every month we kind of come on and look at this report and we're a little bit surprised by the results. So I think, we've been hearing from CEOs that there's some concern about recession. There's some fear that sort of the labor market will not remain as strong. And of course, we want there to be some cooling to sort of combat the effects of inflation, and the Fed is looking to that as well. But I think what this report shows is that the labor market is still really strong. We've been saying that for a few months, that we're not really seeing any signs of sort of complete collapse in the labor market, and we're continuing to really not see that. Openings remain elevated. This remains pretty good news. And so I think CEOs are kind of waiting to see what happens with other companies. And that's kind of maybe they need to maybe look back at their own company and think, if I'm doing well, maybe I should focus on that right now, rather than kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop somewhere else, because we just haven't seen that happen yet. Again, this is lagged. So, we don't know what we'll see in the December data. And of course, these things can change quite quickly. But I think for now, the labor market is still looking really strong.
So, Bloody, do you think that this report, because it is lagged, it's about 2 months behind, is an indication of kind of that sideways move or a plateau that the Fed was hoping for or wanting back in November?
I mean, first, let me reply a little bit to your previous question. I think the rhetoric has changed in the past couple of months. I think we've seen a change in the sort of the sentiment or expectations of CEOs, but also of the market overall. I think we are moving away from very concerning to cautious, I would say. And so, like, the rhetoric has moved to cautious. And I think this specific report reinforces that, but also sort of pushes towards from cautious to cautiously optimistic. And so I think that the fact that everybody was expecting sort of like this big recession, I think if you see even just a prediction from the major banks, you don't see that. You see that most of them are either cautious or cautiously optimistic. And again, this report adds to that in positive ways, in ways potentially that were not expected. I personally, before coming to this report, I actually, again, expected, as the majority of people, that we would see some of those effects of the labor market cooling. And my first reaction would be that we should not read too much into that, in the sense that most of this news, we already saw them. And so even if it was kind of bad, I don't think it would affect the Fed. I think the big and sort of inflation point and important report will be the one that's going to be of the data in January, which actually we have to wait a couple more months. And the reason for that is because if we are going to see any major layoffs, it's going to be during that month. Usually layoffs in January tick, because companies use this performance period to essentially make some of the restructuring side. And if there's an additional effect this year, because companies are sort of wanting to lay off people because they essentially want to rationalize, we're going to see it then. So that's for me the important report. So even coming into this report, if it was not as great as expected, I would say, like, okay, that's not something that essentially is going to affect Fed's decision. But where it is, I think it does move overall the sentiment to a more cautiously optimistic.
Bloody, do you think that as we look to 2023, you were mentioning, we'll get a better understanding of where we're headed maybe with January's data, which we're a little bit, obviously we're talking about some lag data here. Do you think that we are going to see that dramatic shift in 2023 that align more with what else is happening in the economy, like inflation or other areas that we're constantly, evaluating and looking at? Or do you feel like this is kind of the new normal? Too many job openings and not enough people to fill those jobs?
I personally been from the beginning that I don't think that we're going to see a serious recession or a major series of layoffs. And I'm still standing by that. At the very least, we're not going to see those in the first 2 quarters of 2023. All I'm saying is that in January, there might be some indication essentially where the economy might or might not be going. I do expect to see a series of layoffs that might be a little bit higher than previous years, and especially in some specific industries like tech, maybe professional services, finance, that has been directly affected. But again, those are specific to those industries. And again, we've explained some of the reasons why they are happening there. I don't expect those layoffs to essentially go overall in the economy. So back to your question, no, I don't expect a large series of layoffs coming up. and I don't expect us to use the word recession anytime soon.
Well, Bloody Layla, for both of you, Layla, I'll start with you. What is your top takeaways from this report?
Top takeaways are that the labor market is still really strong. This was surprising to see that openings basically stayed the same. We are not seeing across the economy some of the effects of layoffs that maybe we've been seeing in specific sectors. And we still have relatively high quits, relatively low layoffs, relatively high openings. So I think to kind of your question before, Chris, I do think that openings might continue to come down, but that we're going to probably remain pretty elevated for a little while here.
Bloody, how about you? Key takeaway.
At 1.7 jobs per unemployed people, that did not change. The labor market is still very hot, and employees still feel very empowered. So essentially, they are in the driving seat.
Bloody, Layla, thank you so much for your insights. And to all of our viewers, thank you for joining us for this conversation. You can join us again this Friday for our live analysis of the jobs report. For more information about this analysis or any additional insights on the labor market, visit us at lightcast.io. From the Lightcast studios, I am Christopher Laney. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you on Friday.